Content warning. Please note that this episode contains dark themes that some people may find disturbing for younger listeners.
If you think you might be sensitive to this kind of content, please listen with an adult or check out one of our other episodes.
If you or anyone else that you know is feeling suicidal or have really bad depression or anxiety, please don't be afraid to talk to someone. People are always here to help you and to listen to you, and don't ever give up.
We'll be putting some links and phone numbers into the description, so again, if you are feeling sad or depressed, please check out those numbers in the description. There are people who are here to help you.
With that said, enjoy the podcast.
Make sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at This Strange World Podcast and on Twitter at This Strange Pod.
Welcome back to This Strange World Podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm Gavin.
And I'm Leah.
And this is our 10th episode, you guys. Isn't that crazy?
Yay!
And
Isn't
it
that
took
wild?
me so long
That's insane.
to get a good microphone.
I was about to say, and it's also the first episode where Chris has a good microphone. That's not just your computer mic.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've got, now the listeners don't have to listen to the crackly microphone of me. They can now listen to the crisp and
The smooth stylings of Chris Ash.
I felt
Smooth
that. I
down.
felt that bass, man. I felt that.
Oh, yes. Now we're all crispy. So nice. Love it. Love to see it. Love to
Yeah.
hear it. Love to hear it.
Yes, that's really good. So, Gavin, you have a really... You have a
take it
really-
away. Take it away.
She try to take it away. Let her take it away.
I'm trying. Okay.
Wait, hold on, Leah. The viewers can't see this at home, but is there a boom pole behind you?
No, it's like my
Is it a
dad
mic
got me this karaoke machine, and yeah, it's part of a mic stand. And I only use it for getting things out of under my bed that I can't reach.
I was about to say you're really dedicated to production. You've got a boom pole set up right
Mhm.
behind you.
I have a snowball mic. That's how dedicated I am. But
Oh, of course.
anyways, of course. So, Gavin, you have a really interesting topic today. I don't really know much about it. I only know one thing about it, but what is that topic?
Yeah, so it's another conspiracy theory episode. Is this our second conspiracy episode, I think? The first one was Titanic, and now it's this one. I think this is the second one.
Yes.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, the conspiracy theory that I'm talking about has a lot of different names. The most widely used is called the 27 Club, also known as the Forever 27 Club, just the number 27, all
Mhm.
different varieties like that. But so, Leah, you just said you haven't heard of it. Chris, have you heard of it?
A little bit. Is this a club that I don't want to be a part of?
Yeah, I would say you don't want to be a part of this club.
Okay.
And we'll get into why later. But so here's how we're structuring this episode. I'm going to explain what it is, and then I'm going to tell you about a lot of people in this club. And then I don't know if you can hear my scrolling sounds. Then
Yeah, I
I
hear.
have a few theories related to the club, and then some statistics and numbers actually debunking it. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see how this goes.
So we're going to introduce a conspiracy theory only to later debunk the conspiracy theory in the same episode?
Exactly.
Huh. Defeating the purpose of introducing a conspiracy theory.
I mean, I feel like most conspiracy theories can be debunked.
Not
To
the
an
mummy
extent.
from the Titanic. That's foolproof.
True. So a lot of what I'm reading is also taken from websites. So we'll list the sources at the end and they'll be in the descriptions. But it's a lot of talking. I'll definitely have to take some water breaks. This is going to be a lot of me talking, but we'll definitely leave some room for discussion. So anyway, jumping right into it. Are you guys ready? Are you ready to jump right into it?
Yeah,
That's what I'm
man.
saying.
All right. So this was taken from the Wikipedia page. I looked at all different sites. I was doing a lot of different research for this. I was just telling you guys before we started recording that when I first was looking into the 27 Club a few weeks ago, before we did this episode, I didn't find like too much into it. And so I thought this was going to be a short episode. But then earlier today, I was then doing all the research for it. And I realized that there was like so much more and so many different connections and all these different things and more names of popping up. So we'll get into all that. All right. I'm going to be taking a lot of breaths. And I don't know if I'm going to be cutting them out or not. I'll probably cut them out because it's a lot of talking.
You're good, man.
All right. So taken from the Wikipedia page in the simplest way, I use websites from Rolling Stones, History.com, all these different websites, but I thought Wikipedia explained it best because it's Wikipedia. The 27 Club is a list consisting mostly of popular musicians, artists, and actors who died at age 27. Although the claim of a statistical spike for the death of musicians at that age has been repeatedly disproved by research, it remains a cultural phenomenon documenting the deaths of celebrities, some noted for their high-risk lifestyle. Basically, the 27 Club is just a list of mostly musicians. Recently, there are more artists, actors, and there's some athletes in there of people who've died at 27. It's basically what the whole thing is.
Such a weird age.
It is such a weird, and we'll
It's
get into
such a
why it's
specific
specifically
age.
27 as opposed to later I talk about like why it's not like 26 or 28 or even just a different number completely.
I think it's scary because you guys are like 21, I'm 22, and I'm just like, if I were to like pass away at 27, like that would be such a short life because you have so much to do with your life.
No, yeah, it's not too far off. And a lot of these people that I list off, I died at the age of 27. I would have assumed it was so much later. And another thing, which I don't know if I actually wrote it down, but I read it a lot. So we're going off script. Is that 27 apparently is like officially the age. It's like the beginning of your late 20s and officially the age when you've like not fully developed, because I'm pretty sure that's earlier, but like when you're like really an adult is what I saw a lot of different sources cite 27 as. So anyway, jumping a little bit more into detail from it, this was taken from rollingstones.com. And again, all these links will be in the description and at the end of the episode. The 27 Club has become one of the most elusive and remarkably tragic coincidences in rock and roll history. Most of this is related to rock and roll stars. The term became widely known after Kurt Cobain's death in 1994, with rock fans connecting that his age to that of Jim Morrison, Janice Joplin, Brian Jones, and Jimi Hendrix, though it was notable to fans in the early 70s when these four visionaries died just within 2 years of each other. So there were four huge rock artists that died within 2 years of each other, and people started to make connections. And then Kurt Cobain died that same age, like 20 years later, and people were like, oh, that's also strange. And then when Amy Winehouse passed away at age 27 in 2011, it attracted even more attention to the significance of the age. While the club has been largely connected to musicians, it has expanded since, as many young actors, artists have lost their lives due to everything from addiction to suicide to freak accidents. So Wikipedia lists about 75 members, but different lists have different names. Some of them include more athletes, some of them don't. But the most famous there's a famous 7 of them. And it used to be 6 until 2011 when Amy Winehouse joined that list. But I'm going to be talking about 11 of the most famous ones. But really, it's about a 7. So did you guys know that Kurt Cobain, Jim Morrison, Janice Chaplin, Brian Jones, like, did you know that they all died at that age? I didn't even know Amy Winehouse died at 27.
Yeah, I knew Jimi Hendrix.
I didn't know Jim Morrison was 27. I thought that was like... I knew he died young.
The Doors singer, right?
Yeah, he's the lead singer of the Doors.
Okay, my dad and brother would be so disappointed that I asked that in any Doors fan, but I just want to make sure, okay?
Yeah, no, my dad also loves the Doors, and he would be ashamed of me if I didn't know that. But yeah, we're talking about Jim Morrison later. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to be talking about 11 of the most famous people in this club, and I'm going to be talking about them chronologically. So we're starting with the oldest, kind of like the first... concluded to be the first known member. There are other people on Wikipedia that it lists before this person, but this person was only put in later. It wasn't like they were like, oh, this guy's 27. He's the first person to die at 27. He's the starter of the club. He's not like the first Avenger. It's like there were like all these other people, and they were like, oh, well, he also related to it, even though he was from the 30s. So the first person we're going to talk about is Robert Johnson, who was born in 1911 and died in 1938.
That would be 27 years from now.
Yeah.
That would be 27 years.
I did the math in my head. I don't know why, but
yeah, especially all the people who were born and died in the same year. At first I was like, oh my God, wait, they were born in the same year. And I was like, wait, that's the whole thing. We're all 27.
Yeah.
So anyway, Robert Johnson. I did not know who he was. He's a blues singer. Do either of you guys know who Robert Johnson is?
Robert Johnson.
No.
I've never heard of that name before.
Huge in the 30s. But so born over 100, this was all these different descriptions. Some of them are taken from some lines from history.com, some from Rolling Stones. I want to give credit for all these different things because minimal of it is my specific words. A lot of it is a combination from all these different sources. So, born over 100 years ago in rural Mississippi, the blues singer and guitarist Robert Johnson garnered little attention during his lifetime, but was rediscovered in the 1960s, influencing numerous rock and roll pioneers. So, according to legend, Johnson sold his soul to the devil in exchange for his mighty talent, which he demonstrated on street corners throughout the Mississippi Delta and in the 29 songs he recorded between 1936 and 1937. So, within 1 year, he recorded 29 songs. And that was also like a year before his death. So I'm not a musical artist, but that seems like a lot.
That's a lot.
So in August of 1938, just a few months after his 27th birthday, Johnson made moves on the wife of the owner of a roadhouse where he was playing and drank from an open bottle of whiskey he was offered and died 3 days later of strychnine poisoning and pneumonia. Allegedly, the poisoning was from the woman's jealous boyfriend or husband. And currently he is buried in an unmarked grave in Mississippi. So that's the first member.
So he drank whiskey, and then the whiskey was spiked, and he died.
Yeah, basically he was like hitting on this wife of the owner of the roadhouse. Oh, I said wife, and then later I say it's also mildly unknown exactly all this whole situation, but people think that he was poisoned by the wife, the husband or boyfriend of this woman that he was flirting with. And this was just a few months after his 27th birthday. And he was like,
I think we're glossing over the fact. So you said that he sold his soul to the devil? Is that like, how does... Is that confirmed?
Well, so that's one of the theories that I'll talk about later, of that there's a theory that people who sold their soul to the devil for talent die at the age of 27. So I touch upon that at the end when I talk about more theories.
How does that even come about, though? How does someone just go, oh, you sold his soul to the devil?
That's a great question. This was also in the 30s, so I don't know if that was a big concept back then or what was good. But
there's stories online about people who have like sold their soul to the devil for like greed purposes.
Oh no, yeah. I feel like I wonder if this was part of that or if this was one of the first incidences of people being like, oh, they sold their soul to the devil for...
I don't think it's because there was that, who was that? Annalise, although she didn't like sell herself to the devil, but you know, there were cases prior before like the 30s and stuff. So
yeah, I feel like it's almost like a trope of like selling your soul to the devil or selling your soul or selling like something important to you to someone, selling your voice for legs or whatever. Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like a big trope. So like obviously it's like a legend and a theory. Obviously he didn't sell his soul to the devil, but I think I talk about later, he wasn't like super good, and then all of a sudden he became like super good and cranking out songs, and people were like, how?
Kind of like what's that movie, the one about the Beatles, Yesterday. Oh, that was such a great movie. I recommend that. That was great.
I didn't see it.
You should see it.
You should see that movie. You like the Beatles. I have a better ending to the movie, but we'll get into that later.
We can get into that in a future episode. All right, so Robert Johnson is one of the main seven. I think pretty sure he's part of one of the main seven. I'm going to end up talking about 11, but I'll point out who's in the main seven. So Robert Johnson. The second one is Brian Jones, born in 1942, died in 1969. He was one of the founders of the Rolling Stones. And so a founding member of the Rolling Stones, along with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, Brian Jones developed a severe substance abuse problem, which, they, like everyone had, that by the mid-1960s had taken a toll on his health, landed him in jail, and alienated him from his bandmates. He was forced out of the group in June 1969. The following month, Jones was found dead at the bottom of his swimming pool. Police reported that he had drowned while under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Recently, new evidence has suggested that foul play may have had a hand at his death at age 27. So I don't know if there's any new stuff with the whole foul play thing, but basically he got super into drugs, and a month after he was kicked out of the Rolling Stones, he had drank a bunch, had a bunch of pills, and was found dead in a swimming pool. A lot of what we talk about, it's a lot of people dying from like these high-risk lifestyles of drugs and alcohol and partying. And I mean, most of them are like rock and roll stars.
like a lot of people don't think about this, like, oh, they all died at 27, and a lot of them were substance abuse. There's a reason that they died at 27. Like, that's not a normal age to die. Like, there's a reason that
Yeah.
27 is not 27 specifically, but how young 27 is. It's because they're doing all these crazy things that rockers tend to do when they're on the road and everything. They get, hooked onto these drugs and hooked onto alcohol, and they die young. But that's why there's a lot that die young.
Yeah, well, I mean, even then, these big seven, they're all like big names, and even in the few other people and a lot of other people on this list, if I specifically like don't really know some of these people, but like I know some of the bands that they're in, or I know some of these bands were big. That we or I just don't know just because we're young, but it's a lot of the 70s and all these huge rock and roll stars. So this, for example, this next person who is not part of the seven, but still a notable person, who I didn't really know, but I know the band. So Alan Blind Owl Wilson was born in 1943 and died in 1970. Known as Blind Owl because of his poor vision, Alan Wilson headed up the American blues band Canned Heat, which performed at Woodstock in 1969. So that's a year before he died. A songwriter, guitarist, and harmonica player, he famously retaught the aging blues legend Son House, who had been living in obscurity for decades, how to play his own songs. Wilson, who struggled with mental illness and had previously attempted suicide, succumbed to a drug overdose in September 1970, becoming the first of 3 acclaimed musicians to die at age 27 that year. So 1970 was a big year for the 27 Club. So he wasn't considered one of the 7, but he was one of like the 3 that died in 1970, which made it huge.
That's crazy that there was like, you said 3 already in 1970, right?
3 in 1970. And it's like, when I tell you these next 2 stars, if you don't know who Blind Owl was, which I didn't, but these next 2 stars are like possibly the biggest people in rock and roll. So
it's also really sad because I feel like stuff like that, like, mental illness can lead to addiction because you want to try and like help yourself feel better. So you turn to pills and alcohol, and that's just really
I think
heartbreaking.
I think most of these people had a history of drugs and a lot of them mental illness, and then some of them a lot of them were suicide, and then some of them we'll see later were people who had already attempted to commit suicide. So that's one of the reasons why it kind of debunks it, that it's like, we'll get into that later. We'll get into that. So anyway, so the next person that I'm going to talk about is Jimi Hendrix, 1942 to 1970. Remembered as one of the greatest electric guitarists in history, Jimi Hendrix revolutionized rock and roll as both an artist and a producer during his brief 4-year career. He died in London in September 1970, asphyxiating on his own vomit while sleeping. His girlfriend claimed that Hendrix, a heavy drug user who was particularly fond of LSD, had washed down a handful of sleeping pills with red wine before going to bed.
That surprises me. I'm surprised that Jimi Hendrix is in the 27 Club.
Yeah, I would have thought that he was like older. Like, I feel like he's like so huge, and also 4-year career. I didn't realize he only had like a 4-year career.
He only had 4 years, and he made that big of an impact in 4 years.
Yeah, definitely interesting to see that all of these people. I was just blown away researching it, that so many of these people had such a huge impact, and they were only 27 when they died, which just seems so young. I mean, it used to seem so far away. I feel like at least when I was younger, like 27 seemed so far away. But now being 21, like you said, Leah, and you just turned 22, and Chris is also 21, like that. Imagine like you have that few years left.
That's my brother's age. That's what I thought of. I was like,
That's what, yeah.
That's crazy.
So that's insane.
Well, you also have to think too, you said Jimi Hendrix was playing for 4 years and that was his career. And he's considered the greatest rock and roll, or greatest guitar player of all time after 4 years. Can you imagine what would happen had he had a full career and died in his 80s or his 90s?
I know. Yeah. And it was the 70s and he was doing a lot of LSD, which, I mean,
Apparently, I don't know if it's him or Jim Morrison. I think it's him, but I think he was buried with like a joint or something.
That would be funny. I wouldn't.
I think he is, and like
I would believe that,
because I think he was a big also like pothead as well.
Really?
If you're on drugs, I feel like that's when you're the most creative.
Yeah,
and that's how some songs, like really good songs, are written, is while people are high out of their mind and just wavy. But
All these 70s rock stars, because I think, most of these it's a lot of 70s people, and they were all like drinking and on psychedelics, and it was a crazy time. So speaking of drugs, let's move on. And that could really be a transition to anyone on this list. But so the next person we're going to talk about, the last person from 70. I mean, probably not the last big person to die. Well, I think it is. There were only the 3 on the Wikipedia list out of like the 75 people that were dead in 1970. But so the next person is Janice Joplin, 1943 to 1970.
Love her.
Okay.
Born
I
in
gotta do a quick
Texas.
Google search on her.
Janice Joplin went over the.
You don't know her?
I know the name.
I mean, yeah, you know the name.
I looked up Janice Joplin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it says people also search for Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Amy Winehouse, Pamela Corson.
Yeah, it's like all the.
Don't read it all. Don't spoil it, Christopher.
Those are all names that we've mentioned before.
That was really flirtatious. I did not mean.
Let me get into Janice Joplin. So, born in Texas, Janice Joplin went over the San Francisco music scene with her bluesy vocals and powerful stage presence. First as the lead singer of Big Brother and the Holding Company, and later as a solo artist. Despite multiple attempts to get clean, she became increasingly addicted to heroin and alcohol as her career skyrocketed. She died of a heroin overdose in October 1970, less than 3 weeks after the death of fellow rock icon Jimi Hendrix. So within 3 weeks of when Hendrix died, Janice Joplin died.
Wait, what was this year again? Would you mind repeating the year?
1970.
Yeah, that's like the 2020 now. I feel like.
I feel like that was like, what, 2017 or 2016? When was like everyone dying? Was that 2016 or 2017?
That happens every year, I think.
Now it seems like it's every year, but I feel like there was one year where there was like a lot of people dying.
Now it's like every day, honestly.
Well,
You're not
I
wrong.
was going to say, like, I wonder if in 1970, like, this person dies, this person dies, this person dies. If someone's like, what the hell is going on here? Like,
well, so, I mean, that's like exactly what it was, of like these 3 huge rock musicians dying in 1970, and then they were like, all right, that's sus. And then we'll get into 1971, another one dies, and then they're like, all right, well, what's going on?
Yeah.
I think the really cool thing as well is that even though like Hendrix and Joplin released a lot of songs in their prime, there are other songs in the archives that are unreleased. So even though they may be gone, there may be some songs, like there was an artist that had Avicii's songs, he had passed away, but some of his songs had come out and people liked them. So I hope they do find more of their songs because I really like those artists.
Yeah, I think there was something else about Janice Joplin that I had read. I don't remember if I wrote it down, that because apparently she was like regularly using heroin, and apparently whatever how like I don't know, a piece of heroin, a dosage of heroin, I don't know what the description of heroin is, but like the amount or strain or whatever that she had used when she died, a bunch of other people who had also gotten that same one also died. That wasn't, I don't know if there's a conspiracy theory connected to that, but some people are like, maybe it was just like a bad dosage, or she took more than she took more than what she thought like it would have been.
It would be cool to see the autopsy report on that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, she had tried to get clean, so like maybe she was potentially on her way there, but then just this one.
That's all you need is just one overdose, man, and you put yourself in such high risk.
So anyway, one last point about Janice Joplin. So she died in October, and Jimi Hendrix died in September. So like we were just saying, within 3 weeks of each other. And I mean, I'm sure Jimi Hendrix's death was probably a huge thing. Like I'm sure that was like huge. And then now
her death was huge too, I feel like.
Well, but that's what I'm saying, is that people were like, oh my God, that's crazy that like Jimi Hendrix, who probably could have gone on to have this huge career, died at the age of 27. And like people probably weren't done mourning him by the time Janice Joplin died. Yeah. Like, insane. But I think that's crazy. Then the next year, a poet and avid reader of philosophy, Jim Morrison, 1943 to 1971, rose to prominence as the lead singer and lyricist of The Doors, a band he founded with a friend in 1965. By 1969, his drinking had become a problem, making him late for performances and fueling raucous onstage behavior. In July 1971, Morrison died of a heart attack apparently caused by a heroin overdose while living in Paris. It is thought that he mistook the drug for cocaine and snorted a fatal amount.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also crazy that then 2 incidences of heroin and like how I assume all these, like just the progression of like these rock and roll lifestyles of I assume going from like weed to cocaine, LSD, acid, like to heroin, like
Always
they
trying to
all
get a better high than before.
exactly they all have like a similar progression. And it even says that like it is thought that he potentially mistook the drug for cocaine, that like he might have just been trying to snort some cocaine, which also is not good.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't do drugs, okay? No, but seriously, don't do drugs.
Yeah, but I mean, snorting heroin's probably worse.
Yeah, well, just drugs and just don't do it. Like,
Sure.
don't. Anyway, the Doors were actually on this really big show at the time. I forget who it was. My dad was in here. He'd tell the story better than I would. But basically, they were singing "Light My Fire," and
the Ed Sullivan Show.
yeah, that was it. Yeah, and
What show?
so
The Ed Sullivan
Oh,
Show?
the Ed Sullivan Show.
something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, and he didn't want Jim to say higher because like there's like a part where he says that. So he wanted him to kind of switch out the words. And instead, when they were live, and literally the Ed Sullivan Show was the show to watch, would
Yeah,
get millions
huge.
and millions of views. Jim Morrison had decided to say higher, and Ed Sullivan was like, when they finished, "You're never allowed to come on my show ever again."
Oh, that he still said higher, you're saying?
He still said higher. Yeah, he was not allowed to though, but he was like, "I'm gonna disregard it because."
If I'm not mistaken, I think he said it actually more like loudly and passionately than
Yeah.
he did in the studio recording.
Yeah.
I think he was just
I
giving
mean,
him the big
even then,
finger.
but like, so for senior musical, we did Grease, and one of the songs was Greased Lightning, but we weren't allowed to say P-Wagon, or the T-Birds were not allowed to say it. But then for the final show, they wanted to have fun, and they just substituted it and had fun, and it was a huge hit, and it was it was a lot of fun.
I thought you were building up to say that like everyone got in trouble or something.
I mean, we got in trouble in the end, or they got in trouble in the end because, you know,
It's
there
a
were
lot
younger
now.
kids in the audience, but
Yeah.
it's a classic, man.
It is. Yeah. Rock and roll. Speaking of rock and roll, the next person on this list is not one of the 7. So far, I think we've only talked about the 7, but the next 2 people at least, if not. The next 3 people. Yeah, so the next 3 people are not a part of the 7. The only other person that we haven't... So 7 so far. Robert Johnson, Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Janice Joplin, Jim Morrison. Alan Wilson was not a part of the 7. And then the next 3 I'm talking about are not a part of the 7. And then the last 2 are a part of the 7.
Wait,
So-
what's the 7?
Just that there was 7. There's the most famous members. It's like there's the conspiracy theories also referred to sometimes as like the something 7.
The
it used
really
to be
famous people.
Yeah, it used to be like the
Mhm.
6, but then when Amy Winehouse joined in 2011, then it went up to 7. But
Okay.
anyway, I'm only talking about 11 of the people from this club, but the 7 are like the most famous people.
Okay. Go on.
So this next person is still pretty famous. Ron Pigpen Mckernan, 1945 to 1973. He was a founding member of the Grateful Dead. So if you didn't know his name, he was in the Grateful Dead, which I assume you know.
He sounded familiar.
Yeah.
familiar.
Ron McKernan, who also went by the nickname Pigpen, did not share his bandmates' predilection for LSD or other psychedelic drugs. However, his heavy drinking caused him to develop psoriasis in 1970, and by 1972, his health had become so fragile he could no longer tour. He died of internal hemorrhage
Oh my god.
in March 1973.
These are gruesome ways to go.
Psoriasis also like it's not horrible. It's not like super super bad, but I understand how it kind of like dent your mentality and your whole
Yeah.
view on yourself. Kind of thing.
Well, that was like 3 years before he died, was when he like, and also I think
Yeah, but
it's
I mean,
interesting how
yeah.
he wasn't he was in the Grateful Dead, which if there's a
Mhm.
band to represent psychedelic drugs,
it's
it's the Grateful Dead. But
They have the coolest logo, by the way. I
Oh, they
just
do.
gotta say, the
the tie-dye?
Bears.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah.
But so I mean, he didn't do like the LSD or the psychedelic drugs, but then he was just such a heavy drinker that like he had these just.
Mhm.
It wasn't that he like died from like alcohol poisoning. He just had all these health problems then from just heavy drinking,
Mm.
and that was in 73. And so all these other people were in 71. Well, Jim Morrison was 71. The other people were 70. So within like 3 years, a couple of big rockers died.
Mm.
Yeah. So this next one is also. Is this next one the sad one? Then one of them has like a sad line. These are dark. And again, we had the warning at the beginning, but if you're sad, there are links in the description. Please check it out. There are people who are here for you. So this next person, Dave Alexander, 1947 to 1975. The Stooges founding bassist, Dave Xander Alexander. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Stooges.
The
I
Three
feel like
Stooges?
I've heard of the Three Stooges. I haven't heard of
the Three Stooges. It's
Okay.
I don't know if they based their name off the Three Stooges, but so it's a rock band just called the Stooges. The famous name that you might recognize in this band is Iggy Pop, was the front man of this band, who later went on to become a solo act. You don't know Iggy Pop? That's okay.
I am not.
You don't know Iggy Pop?
We don't need to go into why Chris doesn't know who Iggy Pop is. If you saw a picture or like heard some music, you'd probably know it. He was just like
Chris
another big rocker.
Chris didn't know what sushi was until his freshman year of college. I was like, come on, man.
Oh, okay, hold on. We can actually dig into this a little bit. You didn't know what sushi was until freshman year of college? Did you know the concept of it, or you just never had it?
Okay, you
defend yourself.
I knew what sushi was. I had never had sushi until freshman year of college. I was well aware of the concept of.
Okay, I thought you weren't aware of the concept of sushi.
No, it's not like I was like, "What's sushi? What's this?" No, I knew what sushi was.
It. You
I've
stuck
never
to
had
your
it.
fried
Okay.
rice. That's what you Anyways.
All right, no, that's believable. I mean, sushi is not. Also, you're from like Massachusetts. I don't know how big sushi is.
No,
They
we
have
stick with
lobsters.
we
What
stick
are you
with the real
talking
seafood,
about? They
and
have
the real
clam
seafood is
chowder.
lobster.
No,
clam chowder,
that's the
and
whole
clams.
thing. That they got lobster and clam chowder. Like that's like a different level of fish than like sushi. I feel like
That's
sushi.
like no, that's like ascension to heaven.
Exactly.
Right there.
That's like you got fish coming right off the water, and there you go. It's right there. Anyway, we got off topic with the sushi.
Iggy Pop. No,
Iggy
not
Pop.
Iggy Pop. The other person.
Well, Iggy Pop is in this band. It's called the Stooges. Dave Alexander also goes by Xander. So Xander had the reputation of being a loose cannon before the group even came together. He dropped out of high school 45 minutes into his senior year to win a bet,
I love that.
which already, this was
I
before
love
the band
that.
got together. And he and Stooges guitarist Ron Ashton once traveled to England with the hopes of running into the Beatles. But when Alexander took too many downers before a festival appearance and couldn't play, a few days before Funhouse came out, frontman Iggy Pop fired him when he couldn't play before this festival. He'd spend the rest of his life battling addictions and health issues, and according to the book The 27th, he began drinking so much that he developed pancreatitis.
Pancreatitis.
Pancreatitis. There, that's it. And after going to a hospital where his lungs filled with fluid, died of pulmonary edema in February of 1975.
That's like you're drowning almost.
Yeah.
When your lungs fill with
Not-
fluid.
Not to
Yeah.
get off topic, but Gavin, you are nailing these medical terms, by the way.
I know.
Yeah.
You know, I looked up some of these beforehand. Not all of them. I probably should have. But so it's kind of interesting for these few that we've talked about that they didn't overdose. It was like that they got health issues from doing stuff, because then he began drinking so much and he like had his life battling addictions and health issues. So it's kind of, I mean, that also might be why he's not in the Seven. Also, he wasn't like as big of a rock and roller as Jim Morrison, but because all the people who were in like the Seven, I think most of them were like either overdoses or suicide.
Mm. That's
Yeah.
sad, man. That's
It's just-
really sad.
It's a tough way to go the way that he goes, because Leah said it before. It's like you almost kind of drown, even though you're not in water.
Yeah, which I mean, imagine trying to breathe and you're just chilling, but you can't. So I imagine that's not great.
Dang.
But yeah, we were going to record 2 episodes tonight, but I'm honestly glad we're only recording 1, because by the
This
end
is
of
a
this,
little too dark and
It
just
is very
a
dark.
downer episode, honestly.
it is,
Well-
but I honestly think it's very fascinating, and we will continue on trying not to get too depressed from this. So the next person that I want to talk about is, I think I only have 3 people left, but that we're talking about specifically diving into. But so this is the last one who was not a part of the 7, but obviously I'm talking about 11. So this is Pete Ham, 1947 to 1975. So far, pretty much all of these have been the 70s. I think this is also the last 70s one we're talking about. So Peter Ham of Badfinger. I had not heard of him, and I have not heard of that band.
Nope.
I don't know if there's any fans of Badfinger listening. Sorry. But
My favorite band, Gavin.
Badfinger was one of the bands that the Beatles signed to their Apple label in the 60s. And so Pete Ham committed suicide in 1975. And as is the cases with suicides, Ham reached a point where death seemed to be the only solution to his problems. He met bandmate Tom Evans in a pub near his home in England on the evening of April 24th, 1975, 3 days before his 28th birthday, and told him, "Don't worry, I know a way out." Fortified with drink, Ham went back to his home, wrote a note in which he expressed his bitterness towards his manager, and hung himself in his garage. So it's a pretty big downer.
You look at these stars and you look, if they think you think that they have it all. Like, I would love to be like in those shoes, and I would love to be touring with all these people and signing with the Beatles. You don't know the demons that these people face.
Yeah.
You know, like all these people, they have a public image, and then behind the scenes, they all, a lot, I don't want to speak for everybody, but you know, some of them have pretty bad demons that they're facing every single day with addiction or depression or what.
Yeah. No, you're completely right. I mean, like, Billie Eilish, like, she has been really forthcoming about, you know, feeling depressed and anxiety and stuff, as well as Selena Gomez. She literally has been so open about what she has and her lupus and stuff, and it's just like, you don't know anything, and people are so quick to judge, and people think that they know the ins and outs of celebrities or influencers' lives, when really you don't. You know, there may be a reason they're not posting something, and you can't judge. Honestly, you're not them. And it's just like, if you're a celebrity also, or like an influencer, it's like a totally different life, just because you have to have like security. You need to protect yourself because people are going to try and hurt you and stab you in the back, kind of, not literally, but you know, it's really sad to.
Yeah, well, I mean, even you mentioned those few people, but I think even also, like, isn't Demi Lovato pretty forward about how wasn't she the heroin and like she went to rehab? And I feel like so much of today, then, like, mental health, thank goodness, is such a big talking point. And I mean, if it's finally becoming a big open thing to talk about now, I can only imagine what it was like in the 70s. And I'm sure especially these rock and roll artists who had just this image of drugs and sex and rock and roll and hardcore and partying and taking all these drugs. And I'm sure they, like, if someone offered them a drug, they would feel pressured to like take it, and like they didn't want to seem like they weren't like hardcore rock and roll.
That's why I'm glad I'm like not famous, as well as it would, as nice as it would be, like Chris
not rock and roll star.
Just like a star or just someone like famous, because like
there's so much pressure.
Oh my God.
Your life would never ever be the same. You know, there are episodes of like the stars being like, man, I wish I could just go out with my friends and not have security like follow my back. You know, I just want to be able to drive and go. And like, you can't live that life.
There's so many people that I know that are like, I want to be a star, and they like are doing everything they can to get to be in that point. And there's a lot of people who are jealous of celebrities for, you know, being in the public eye and being like having literally everything. Like, they're driving Lamborghinis up and down the street, and they have all this money, and they're throwing it around like it's like confetti. They like you, if you, let's say you want to go in that situation, there's a lot of those people that are dealing with a lot of stress, and they're dealing with stuff behind the scenes that we have no idea. And it's not all like glitter and, you know, glam and it's not all perfect. Like, it looks perfect, but it's not all perfect. And there's a lot of people that are dealing with a lot of stress and depression and anxiety just in every day when they're living. They can't go anywhere.
Exactly.
I mean, also what Gavin said about like the pressure, you know, when you sign up with an industry and stuff, like people are going to pressure you. Oh, you got to dress like this. Oh, you got to eat like this. Oh, you got to buy things like this. And like, you can't be yourself when you have those type of pressures on you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even like, so Pete Ham of Badfinger, I've never heard of Badfinger. None of us have heard of Badfinger. It was signed to the Beatles label. Like, I'm sure the pressure of that, insane. But then even just the story of him that like he met his bandmate at a pub, and like the fact that they like have that he says like, "Don't worry, I know a way out," and like went home, like wrote a note about how he didn't like his manager and hung himself. That's like,
when you said like didn't like have a way out.
Don't worry, I know a way out. That's just
when
like
you said that, I was like, oh dang, I know what's coming next,
chills.
man.
That's
And
like,
you're right. What, Leah, you were saying all day you were thinking about it? Like that person must have been thinking about it?
When I've been
Oh.
depressed and I'm like, oh yeah, you're really like, and I feel like down and stuff, and it's just like, you know, you don't want to like think like this is like really deep and really dark, but, like you don't want to think that way, but I have to remind myself that I have friends, I have family, and I have a dog as well that cares about me.
You have a lot of dogs. How many dogs do you have in your house?
I have 4. And they all, maybe except for one, they all care about me, and they all love me, and I'd be really bummed if, like, you know. Anyways, let's try and, if we can go on to a little bit of a lighter.
Oh, it's a very deep, that's why we have the explicit, that's why, this is a very
Exactly. This is, like, the most real, I feel like. Yeah.
But so, I mean, it even said again about Pete Ham, where he reached a point where it seemed like death was the only solution, which, to remind our listeners, it is not. Please don't kill yourself. There are people out there who love you, even if it doesn't seem like it. Anyway.
Yeah, I felt that way.
So now the last two are, so that was all the 70s. Now we skip ahead to the 90s. These last two are really what kind of secured the 27 Club as being, reminding people and becoming a huge thing. So this next one, Kurt Cobain, 1967 to 1994. And everyone, we all know Kurt Cobain, obviously.
Oh, of course.
Chris, do you know Kurt Cobain?
Yes.
Okay.
I've heard of him.
I may not know Iggy Pop.
You don't know that much about Kurt Cobain, Leah? That's okay. So, an icon of the Seattle grunge scene, Kurt Cobain formed Nirvana with a friend in 1985. The band achieved mainstream success in the early 90s. Dave Grohl was in Nirvana, and now he's oh my God, what's his band?
He's on the Foo Fighters.
Foo Fighters, that's what it is. Yeah, so now he's in the Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl was the drummer of Nirvana. Now he leads the Foo Fighters. But so he was in Nirvana. I don't know if I don't think he was the one who Kurt Cobain formed it with. I think he joined later because he was much younger than them. But anyway, Kurt Cobain formed Nirvana. The band achieved mainstream. He formed it in 85. Band achieved mainstream success in the early 90s. Under a glaring public spotlight, Cobain struggled with mental illness, chronic health problems, and a heroin addiction. He committed suicide in April 1994, leaving behind his wife, the musician Courtney Love, and their baby daughter. I'm pretty sure. Hold on, I just need to do some.
Wait, he had a daughter and he committed suicide?
Yeah, he had a daughter and he was married. And I'm pretty sure. Hold on, how did he? I don't want to. Yeah, he shot himself. That's what I thought.
Oh no.
Yeah. I feel like this is probably one of the most famous suicides of like the 90s.
This is one of the most famous suicides of just music in general.
Yeah. And like such a big icon of struggling with depression and mental health and all these addictions. And I feel like he was really in a different era than all those people in the 70s, because then there was so much tabloid talk and there was the fame and attention and his marriage to Courtney Love. And then people were wondering if Courtney Love had to do with it, and so many like different things. And I mean, I know that there's like different, I don't know if even there might be conspiracy theories related to like Courtney Love and him, and I don't really know all about that, but the fact that he shot himself in the head, and he was married, he had a daughter, he was 27, he was in one of the biggest bands of the 90s, possibly of all time. I'm pretty sure I'm reading it off his Wikipedia page right now, but Rolling Stones included him on its list of 100 greatest songwriters of all time, 100 greatest guitarists, 100 greatest singers of all time. He was ranked 7th by MTV in the 22 greatest voices in music. And in 2006, he was placed 20th by Hit Parader on their list of 100 greatest metal singers of all time. So he had it going for him. He was only 27.
He was my brother's age, and he had a kid and was married.
Yeah.
Well, like, oh my God.
Let me see when the kid was born. The kid was born, so he died in 94. The kid was born in 92.
That's literally a year after my brother was born.
Oh my God, wait. The kid was born in 92, and oh my God, guess how old the kid is currently?
It's like 25, 27.
Don't say
27.
Oh, don't say 27.
Yeah, Frances Bean Cobain. She's 27 right now.
That's sad.
I think the thing that also, in a way, there's something that comes to light is that, kids, when they're parents or family member passes away from something, they're usually also the one to kind of start a GoFundMe or to start some sort of charity or something that, you know, helps with these type of things. Like there's this like stuttering charity that my family and someone that we know is like highly involved in, as well as other charities like SPCA and stuff like that. But I think it's really cool because kids and family members really care about this and want to change and make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you get my gist.
But yeah, so I mean, Kurt Cobain was part of the Seven because he was one of the biggest rock stars in the world. I mean, maybe, I don't know if technically, I guess technically a rock star, but I mean, he was in grunge and punk and in Nirvana, which is huge.
Nirvana has the best cover when it comes to that baby one in the pool.
Yeah.
It's just like, and then the smiley, of course, they're.
Yeah.
Oh, the smiley face thing.
Those are my
most
two
recognizable
favorite.
thing. Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, wrapping up this list of the 11 that I'm touching upon, and the final one of the 7, Amy Winehouse, 1983 to 2011. Leah, I see you nodding. Are you a fan of Amy Winehouse?
Mm-hmm. There's one song. Oh my god, I'm blinking out on her song right now that I know.
Well, there's one big song that she had called Rehab, which was her hit. So anyway, I'll jump into it. An English singer-songwriter whose powerful voice and unique style won her numerous awards and honors, Amy Winehouse battled drug and alcohol addiction for years. Her substance abuse problems were frequent tabloid fodders. I don't know why I used that word. They were big in the tabloids. And inspired some of her songs, most notably the hit Rehab. On July 23rd, 2011, Winehouse was found dead in her London apartment, becoming the latest musician to have their career cut short at the age of 27.
I didn't know that the Rehab song was her. I thought that was some other singer.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't.
Do you know the Rehab song? No.
And that's it. No. I didn't know
that song Back to
her.
Black. Wasn't that her? And I go back to black. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I did not
think
do that justice, but
like her Rehab song,
like
Back
to Black. Yeah.
I didn't know that song. Yeah. She also had like the really like thick and like almost kind of like Egyptian eyeliner look, which I thought that was like her iconic look.
The style,
and
it was like 2000s.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, then 2011. So I mean, she was huge, and then in the 2000s, right before 2010. But yeah, so again, battled drug and alcohol addiction for years. And did I just say how she died? Like, give me a second.
Do you also notice that these people, a lot of these people that Gavin is mentioning, actually died in London?
I mean, yeah, some of them are British, and I think I talk a little bit about the research that I talk about later. I think was done about British artists. But so Amy Winehouse died of alcohol poisoning in her apartment, and I briefly saw some footage of like people outside, and like it's insane. But so apparently after her death, Back to Black temporarily became the UK's best-selling album of the 21st century. Temporarily. So I guess it wasn't, or it was at the time. I mean, it was 2011. So VH1 ranked Winehouse 26th on their list of 100 greatest women in music. So yeah, she was born in London, died in London at the age of 27.
I'm checking something else.
Why?
It's crazy. Like 27 is such a random age. I would understand like 25, 30.
That's a great transition. Let's transition. So anyway, going off to more things. An individual does not necessarily have to be a musician to qualify as a member of the 27 Club. Rolling Stones included television actor Jonathan Brandis, who committed suicide in 2003, in a list of members of the 27 Club. Anton Yelchin, who played in a punk rock band but was primarily known as a film actor. He was the Star Trek actor who died in 2016.
Yeah.
He's considered part of the 27 Club.
The Star Trek guy, right?
Yeah. 27. You know
the classic? The classic Star Trek?
No, the recent ones, like with Chris Pine.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I'm a classic guy.
Anyway, so he was in he was 27.
Ooh.
Oh, sorry.
You're talking to the wrong girl about this. You want to talk about Star Wars and Star Trek? Talk to my dad.
Yeah. So anyway, the television actor Jonathan Brandis, Anton Yelchin, he wasn't a punk rock band, but he was more so known as a film actor, and I think he did some stuff when he was younger of like, I don't know if he was necessarily a child actor, but he did some stuff when he was younger. And also I'm going to butcher this. John Michael Basquit has been included. He didn't really have a musical career, but he was a prominent graffiti artist and painter, and he was also a strong collaborator with Andy Warhol. And I looked up some of his paintings, and I recognized them. I'm sure you guys would too. So those are some people that we talked about. What are some big themes that we've seen so far?
Seen a lot of drugs.
A lot of drugs.
Seen a lot of alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Also just like mentality, like mental illness.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of that, and that's like really sad. This is a really like hard episode for me, just because I feel like I can relate to a lot of people that have died or attempted suicide. Just because, you know, it's a really hard topic to talk about, and also it's a very sensitive topic. And like Gavin said, and like I said at the beginning of the episode, if you ever feel like really sad, please reach out to the numbers. We'll have them listed. And like, you know, it's so sad. I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry after this episode.
I know it's
really
hard. It's a very dark episode. Anyway,
really hard.
Moving right along. Before we get into some statistics, I've got 2 to 3 broader theories to talk about. These are gonna be quick.
Mm-hmm.
So these were taken from happymg.tv. Wrote these down, but I know that these are big theories. So the first big one is the idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy. So Kurt Cobain once said, "Nobody dies a virgin. Life fucks us all." And so now we definitely have to make this explicit because we're trying to avoid swearing. So anyway, nobody dies a virgin. Life fucks us all. Kurt Cobain said that.
Craig,
when Kurt Cobain was found dead in his home in Seattle by a self-inflicted gunshot wound, shotgun wound. Oh, I didn't mention that.
Ooh.
It was a shotgun to the head on April 8th, 1994. The world was astir. His death was one of the most discussed events of the 90s and has even brought about conspiracy theories, obviously. The sudden death of this grunge icon shook the world, and fans mourned for many years. Cobain's mother, Wendy O'Connor, famously said after Kurt's death, "Now he's gone and joined that stupid club. I told him not to join that stupid club." Unfortunately, this was the quote that dominated the headlines at the time, only deepening the already brooding mythology. Yet Cobain was known to thank suffering as he needed it as a source for his art. As Friedrich Nietzsche so eloquently puts it, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. And many believe that Cobain entered the 27 Club as a source of sacrificial inspiration and intentional martyrdom. Martyrdom? I don't know what that word means. Martyrdom? Is that a word? Do you know what that word means?
Martyrdom?
Martyrdom? That might be it. Yet Charles R. Cross, author of The Heavier Than Heaven, a biography of Kurt Cobain, begs to differ. No person, no matter how many demons they had at age 27, would want that club in their obituary. I've seen some people who think that these deaths are intentionally timed. And so also said, like Kurt Cobain intentionally killed himself at that age simply to be in that club. You know, he suffered from depression, drug addiction, and numerous other issues. He tried to kill himself at 17, 25, 26 as well. So it's not like he just did it to join the club. So basically, this whole conspiracy is basically saying that people are doing it just to be in the club, which is, first of all, is an unofficial club in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. I don't like that theory because it makes so the 27 Club is such a trivial thing. Like it's not even like it's such a like it's not even a thing. First of all, if it was a thing, you wouldn't permanently end your life just so you can be like, oh, I was in the 20. It's like you get a little certificate.
Yeah, what do you get out of it? You're dead.
You don't get anything out of it because you're dead. But like, it's just why give up giving inspiration to millions of people around the world just so you can put your name in some stupid club?
Exactly. I don't think anyone's trying to do that. Because at that point, these are all huge artists who would want to continue to be big, and most of them are overdoses.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes artists feel really lonely because they just, in a way, can't relate to anyone, and they put it in their songs. But like, sometimes you need someone to connect with you.
Yeah.
And, artists don't want to have their emotions and their privacy and their secrets put out into the media. And, the paparazzi, they're nasty. Like, they can stir up a lot of beef. And, maybe they just had to, like, hold it in them and they just couldn't do it anymore.
Leah, do you think that if there's any theory about that they would do it to be in the 27 club, as kind of like if they were going to do it anyways, they would do it in 27 just to kind of give like a big finger to the society, being like, all right, I'll be in your stupid club. And then,
I mean, like you're saying, are you asking basically like, oh, people are just killing themselves at 27
no.
just to be in this club?
I'm saying, well, you were saying like he was dealing with a lot of stuff, and maybe he was feeling very lonely and stuff. I wonder if there was, on the other side of, like I said, that was a stupid theory, but do you think that it would be like he did it to be like, all right, like I'm in the club, as in like a big,
I mean, I don't know him. I can't.
Being like, all right, I'm in your club.
I don't know him. I don't think I can say whether or not that's what he wanted. I think that it just happened to happen at the age of 27. Like Gavin said, he attempted at 15. He attempted at 25,
he attempted
26.
at 17, 25, 26,
17.
and then was able to do it at 27. So I don't think, I agree with Leah. I don't think because he might have done it at 17 and then he would have been dead at 17. One of the other big theories that I have goes back to Robert Johnson that we were talking about. This one's called Dealing with the Devil. Perhaps the curse of the Forever 27 Club, which is another one of the names, is predicated upon one of its earliest members. Robert Johnson is the root and source of an entire generation of blues and rock and roll. The legend of his deal with the devil is as famous as the tales of Homer, yet his real life is shrouded in poverty and obscurity. So Johnson was born in Mississippi in May 1911 and died 27 years later on August 16th, 1968. Robert's mother, Julia, had 10 children before he was born, all out of wedlock. Johnson was born illegitimately to a plantation worker named Noah Johnson and was sent to live with his stepfather, Charles Dodd, in Memphis when he was 4 years old. Johnson learned the basics of guitar in Memphis, but before moving back to Delta to live with his mother, where he was far more interested in music than working on the plantation. Robert married Virginia Travis at 16 in 1929. However, Virginia died 1 year later during childbirth. This was the same time Johnson saw Son House play live for the first time. Son House recalled many years later that Johnson would pick up the guitars between sets. Quote, "Such a racket you've never heard. Get that guitar away from that boy. He's running people crazy with it." End quote. While Johnson made 41 recordings throughout his life, though only making $100. The veracity of the story of Robert Johnson meeting the devil at the crossroads is strengthened by the constant reference to Satan in his music. Furthermore, he makes blues wildly popular again, bringing it to an entirely new audience, and as a result, birthed rock and roll.
I wonder if the theory comes from if anyone listens to him play, and then someone in the audience is like, "Man, that boy's got the devil in his fingers." Like, I wonder if that's like where it comes from.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Like,
I mean, even also there was
I've
almost
never heard of it.
he mentioned the devil a lot in his music and like Satan, not in a way of like satanic, but like same type of way, like that song like "Devil Went Down to Georgia," in like all the blues ways. They're not saying like I'm gonna sacrifice to Satan. Like it wasn't satanic.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Sometimes like that word has like meaning, or like, like you said, not necessarily satanic, but like what the devil, like, I don't know.
Like Billie Eilish has a song that has Lucifer in it.
The Lucifer.
Yeah.
That's a really good song, by the way. Yep. If you haven't listened to it, which you probably have, but if you haven't, check it out, because that's one of her songs that I really like.
But that doesn't mean that she sold her soul to the devil.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe. She's like, what, just turned 18?
You think like an 18-year-old girl had been like, "Yo, Satan, come here, let's dance, you and me, let's go."
I mean, she's huge and she's 18. I'm not going on the record saying Billie Eilish sold her soul to the devil, but she's an incredible musical artist and already has had countless of hits. When was Ocean Eyes? Was she like 15 or 16 during Ocean Eyes?
14.
I heard that first song,
14?
yeah.
Jesus. Yeah.
And it started out on SoundCloud as well. That's where she was discovered, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, going away from Billie Eilish and back to this. Yeah, the devil theory, I feel like only really holds up with Robert Johnson. It doesn't really work with any of the other members. No one talks about Kurt Cobain selling his soul to the devil to be able to sing grunge. One last theory that I had, which Wasn't, well, it was kind of on some of these websites, but I just thought it was really interesting, but it's very quickly debunked. It's called the white lighter myth. Now, I'm not a smoker, but apparently there's this whole thing that white lighters are bad luck, bad fortune. So the white lighter curse or white lighter myth is an urban legend based on the 27 Club, in which it is claimed several musicians and artists died while in possession of a white lighter, leading white lighters to become associated with bad fortune. The myth is primarily based on the deaths of Jimi Hendrix, Janice Joplin, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain. The myth has been integrated with cannabis culture. I didn't write this down, but another part of it is also that when you're like packing a bowl with a lighter, if you use the bottom of it, then like you'll see the ash on a white lighter, but you wouldn't see it on a black lighter. So like if cops were like looking at your lighters, they would see like the ash, something like that you would like, and they knew that you were like smoking weed.
I mean, I smoke for anxiety purposes, even though I'm in the midst of getting a medical marijuana card, and like I have a white lighter, and I'm fine. But
Bad fortune. Anyway,
I put a fox on it. There we go. No more.
Well, now it's cute.
Then
Chris,
we're
what are
good.
your thoughts on the white lighter myth? Like, because then then they all had the like Jimi Hendrix, Janice Joplin, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain like had white lighters in their pockets. Is what this curse or myth is claiming.
So, were they all the same type of white lighter?
Yeah,
Or
it was that they were big white disposable lighters.
Oh, they were all the same
Yeah.
white lighter. Okay. Well, coincidence, but my first thought was I feel like if you look hard enough, you can probably find that with anything.
True, I agree. Do you guys want to hear the debunking of this?
Yeah.
So before you add the debunking, maybe
Wait, Lee,
like,
do you have anything
'cause,
to say before we debunk it?
I mean, yeah, the thing is, like, with the lighters, if you want more detail and stuff or a design on your lighter, it usually costs more. So, like, usually white and black are kind of more the cheaper colors just because they're so easily produced.
No, I think
And
it said that
stuff,
like
it doesn't
the theory
cost.
was also that Bic initially only produced black and white lighters, but then because of
Yeah.
all this, the white lighters were known to be bad fortune. So anyway, in 2017, Snopes.com published an article discrediting the theory, noting that Bic did not begin producing white disposable lighters until several years after the deaths of the members of the 27 Club, including Hendrix, Joplin, and Morrison, and that disposable lighters produced by other companies were not widely available at the time. That just disposable lighters in general weren't the trend. So I think Kurt Cobain had a white lighter in his pocket, but none of the other artists did. They might have had lighters, but they weren't big and they weren't disposable. They were likely a different brand or not there altogether.
Yeah.
So pretty easy debunking of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You say it with some skepticism, Chris. That's like you're a skeptic. Yeah. I know you, dude. I know you.
He was just the one who said that you can really pull it from anything, which I think is a great point, which a lot of this is also coincidence. And we're about to, as we kind of wrap it up, we're going to look at some numbers of some statistics of people dying at different ages. And so it's that same kind of like, we'll see of like the whole idea of like coincidences and stuff, as Chris was saying earlier with the lighters, and how you can just kind of like pull it out of, like you can form things to work however you want it to work. Exactly. So anyway, let's get into some numbers, some statistics. I promise to all of our listeners, they're not that bad. It's not a lot. You will survive.
We're parkies. We don't use math, man. So
we're almost there. This is like wrapping up. So this was taken from theconversation.com. They also had a great graph that shows musical artists dying at different years. Obviously, I can't show you that because this is an audio thing, but I can describe what it was. It has it in numbers. In a population of dead musicians spanning 7 decades from 1950 to 2010, for which an accurate age of death could be identified, 1.2. Well, so it says N equals 11,054. I assume that means the amount of musicians that died. So 1.2%, which is 128, died at 26. 1.4% died at 28, and 1.3 at 27. So 1.2, 26, 1.4, 28, 1.3, 27. That means there were more deaths at 28 than 27, and only slightly less at 26 than 27 between 1950 and 2010.
So you could essentially make the 25 Club.
Yeah.
And the 28 Club.
Exactly.
In the 26 club. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do every club.
Do you want to know what year had the highest frequency of deaths?
What?
I'm going to
Age.
guess.
You want to guess?
Sorry.
Why don't you guess? No, I want you to
wanna
guess.
It's in the 70s.
No.
Oh, never mind. Go on.
Is it like 30s, 40s?
It's in the 50s. Age 56 as the
55?
highest. Yeah, it's
I
56.
said 55. Did you hear me say 55
I
before you
did.
said 56?
It
Okay,
lagged,
you're
so,
gonna
yeah.
add that in there. You're
It's in
gonna
there.
add that.
It's in there. You said it. There's a lag, so yeah. Age 56 had the highest frequency of deaths at 2.2%. Notable dying at this age includes Eddie Rabbitt, Tammy Wynette, Mimi Farina, Johnny Ramone, Chris Ledoux, Vandy Smokey Hampton, and Charles Baby Tate. To be fair, I don't know any of those names. I'm sorry if our listeners, if you do know those names, I don't know those names. I don't know if you guys know those names. So anyway, the last thing that I'm going to touch upon before we do a recap is there was, of course, a survey done. Because, of course, not a survey. There was research, numbers, people at universities doing research. So this was taken from history.com. The list of famous musicians who died at age 27 is tragically long. It's so long, in fact, that it prompted researchers to investigate whether or not there could be a statistical explanation. So led by Adrian Barnett from Queensland University of Technology in Australia, a team of statisticians examined 3 theories behind the curse of 27. First, musicians often achieve stardom in their early 20s, so the risky habits that often accompany fame, drinking, drugs, and other hallmarks of a rock and roll lifestyle, might simply peak a few years later. Second, musicians might consciously or subconsciously seek enshrinement in the legendary 27 Club alongside their idols, engaging in dangerous or even suicidal behavior at that mythic age. So that was like that second theory that we talked about. And finally, the theory could represent confirmation bias, in which people focus on examples that support their preconceptions rather than, for instance, taking note when celebrities die at 26 or 27, which Chris has been bringing up this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So, to separate fact from fiction, Barnett and his colleagues assembled an international sample of 1,046 solo artists and band members who had a #1 album in the UK between 1956 and 2007. 71 of those musicians, which was 7%, had died. 3 of them at the age of 27. 4 famous members of the 27 Club were excluded, which was Robert Johnson because he died in 1938, Jimi Hendrix, Janice Joplin, and Jim Morrison because they never topped the UK charts. So these were all like UK studies.
Mm-hmm.
A statistical analysis showed that the survival rate for young musicians was no lower than 27 than at similar ages, and only after 60 did risk of death increase substantially. So basically proved there's no specific reason why it should be the 27 Club.
Yeah.
And so while the study's authors detected no heightened risk for 27-year-olds, they did observe a cluster of related premature deaths among musicians between 20 and 40 in the 70s and early 80s. In the late 80s, however, no deaths occurred within the same age group. The researchers speculated that improved treatments for heroin overdose or the transition from hard rock to pop music might account for that shift. So that, I think, might possibly be the most interesting part, saying that there's obviously a lot of premature deaths between 20 and 40-year-olds in the 70s and early 80s. But by the late 80s, there were barely any deaths in there. And we did a big jump when we were talking about people from the 70s to the 90s, talking about Kurt Cobain. So there really weren't that many huge deaths in the 80s of anyone who landed in the 27 Club. What do you guys think about that?
I think a lot of things settled down in the 80s.
Yeah.
I was not born in the 80s, so I have no idea. But the 60s was a big drug time. The 70s was a big drug time.
Dang it, Chris! Shut up, man!
You can say the exact same thing as me.
No, you're good, man. Keep
But
going.
the 80s, I could be way off, but the 80s aren't really stereotypically a druggy time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, the 70s, a whole other league, I would say.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
that's
Leah,
when
go
like
ahead.
people kind of. I mean, you said it, man. But yeah, I mean, like Woodstock was like hippy dippy LSD, marijuana. Let's get into it. Let's have an orgy. Let's, because like people were
Yeah.
living life,
Yeah.
and so it kind of, unfortunately, maybe that's why a lot of people in the 27 Club, passed away because it was just the time and the hype of all the drugs and drug paraphernalia. So, I mean, Chris said it.
I'm so sorry.
We can move
Damn,
on from it.
Chris.
So
I'm sorry.
I have the Wikipedia pulled up with the list of all the people in the club, 75 names. And I just pulled the spot up of the 80s. And so we go from 79, this guitarist for the Count Bishops, Zenon DeFleur. That was in March of 79. In 80, there was Jacob Miller, who died in a car collision. He was a reggae artist and lead singer for the Inner Circle. But after that, it jumps to 85, where there was Masako Natsume, who was an actress, died of acute myeloid leukemia. Then there was Dee Boone, who died in 85, traffic collision with a car, guitarist, lead singer of punk band Minutemen. And then 88, another songwriter. And then also 88 was that artist I talked about, John Michael Basquit, painter, graffiti artist, formed the band Grey. So he wasn't a band. And then there's only like 2 more people in the 80s. And then we jump to the 90s and there's a ton of people. But in the 70s, it's like a pretty big chunk of it. I think the reason why there's the 7 is because it's a lot more interesting ways that people died. There's a couple of murdered on here, but there's electrocution, like fell off a horse and died from injuries, plane crash.
Who was that? Can you read that? The
Fell off
horse
a
one?
horse?
'Cause that sounds, yeah.
Roger Lee Durham. He was a singer and percussionist of Bloodstone. I don't know what
That
Bloodstone
kind of
is.
sounded familiar. I don't know that guy, but that one sounded familiar.
It's an
And
R&B
yeah,
soul and funk band from Missouri. But yeah.
Damn, you gotta fall off a horse in the worst way possible if you die.
And that was in
like-
73. I don't know how many people were riding horses in 73. But
I don't think there was a lot.
What type of a singer or what was?
The singer and percussionist of Bloodstone, which was an R&B band. Wasn't huge, but in the
R&B.
70s.
Okay,
or
sometimes
late
like
60s.
Western also.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But one interesting thing is that then scrolling all the way down to recently, so there was, let's even just look at the 2010s. There's a good amount of people. I'm trying to see if there's anyone notable. Drag queen, singer, television personality, and classically trained dancer. Sahara Davenport died of heart failure in 2012. I don't know them, but I know that is
I've heard
a
the name.
notable one.
Never heard that name.
In 2016, there was Anton Yelchin, who was famously Chekhov in the Star Trek reboot, guitarist for the Hammerheads, who we touched upon. And then, so 2017, Kim Jong-hyun, lead guitarist and lyricist for Shiny. 2018, January 2018, Fredo Santana, an American rapper, died of cardiovascular disease and idiopathic epilepsy. This is a list of 75 people, which so that's all that I basically have for my script. So now we're just freeballing it. But I would recommend checking out the Wikipedia, looking up 27 Club. There's still so many more people and people from all around the world. We just touched upon some of the bigger people. A lot of the see also section of Wikipedia it talks about, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, apophenia? I don't know what that means, but that basically just means trying to look for reasoning in something that there's like no reasoning in, which I think we touched upon. It also talked about, which I didn't touch upon, Saturn Return, which basically is like, I think Saturn is in the same place where you were when you were born. It's like an astrology thing, and that happens approximately 27 years after you were born. So there's also like some astrology stuff related to this that we didn't even touch upon.
But then that'd be like Saturn would be in the same place every single day, which is not the case.
In horoscopic astrology, a Saturn return is an astrological transit that occurs when the planet Saturn returns to the same place in the sky that it occupied at the moment of a person's birth. While the planet may not reach the exact spot until a person is 29 or 30, the influence of Saturn return is considered to start in a person's late 20s, notably the age of 27. Psychologically, the first Saturn return is seen as the time of reaching full adulthood and being faced, perhaps for the first time, with adult challenges and responsibility. So that's what I was talking about earlier about how 27 is like full adulthood. And so there's also this like astrology stuff related to the 27 Club. There's still a lot more that we didn't even touch upon. But so that's kind of all that I have. This has actually turned out to be a lot longer of an episode than what I thought. But Chris and Leah, What are your thoughts? I know it was also a downer in the middle when we were talking
Yeah.
about all the different people. And again, if you are having suicidal thoughts, we will have stuff in the description. But what do you guys think about all of this whole theory as a whole?
You're pointing at me?
I'm pointing
Why
at
don't
you.
you
Yeah,
go?
go ahead.
Leah, why don't you go
I
first?
mean-
Because you just said that
Thunder.
Chris stole whatever you had to say last time. So why don't you go first so you can steal what he has to say? Unless
Right.
you're not ready.
I mean, it's just, I don't know how I feel about the theory. I just kind of say, I wouldn't even put it as like a theory or like a club. I just think it's kind of a time of unfortunate events when people have died at 27, and you know, a lot of them were really big names. But I mean, like, it's just like I said earlier, it's a really depressing thing, and you really can't come up with a conspiracy that I personally feel like you really can't come up with a conspiracy behind this club, just because, like I said, it's natural. I mean, some deaths weren't, but like, see, I don't even know. Chris, why don't you go so I can think a little bit?
Before Chris goes, there's one more thing that I want to interject, kind of going off of what you said. It does just seem like it's a random thing to kind of say 27. And I think in recent years, I think in 2017, it would have been 2019, but I think we were very close to a resurgence of the 27 Club, because there is a famous musician who died at the age of 26, who, if they lived for a few more months, it would have been 27. And that was Mac Miller, died at the age of 26.
Oh, yeah.
And he died in
Yeah.
September. His birthday was in January. So I am curious about, first of all, I wish Mac Miller didn't die. Great musician. But
Yeah, he's
I
from
would have wondered what
Pittsburgh.
happened if, because the last big musician who joined the club, that there was a resurgence of this in the news, and I saw these news clips from CNN and everyone talking about it, was Amy Winehouse in 2011. So that's why I wonder if someone as big as Mac Miller died right after he turned 27 in 2019. How would that have brought a resurgence back now? And I wonder who, and eventually, like, I'm sure within the next 10 years, some huge musical artist is going to die at the age of 27, and then it's going to blow the whole thing up again. I feel like it's never going to go away. It's going to constantly be circling back.
Well, I think Mac Miller also, like you guys had said, was facing some really bad inner demons again. He dated Ariana, and I don't know exactly. I don't want to quote her on anything because I don't have anything of hers. But like, she did say that he was facing a lot. He was going through a lot, and that she was really, really heartbroken when he passed away. Honestly, so was I, because I really, really liked him. And
yeah.
Rest in
Ariana's
peace, man.
27 right now, so
yeah,
she
she
doesn't
just turned 27, like
in
a
June.
month
Yeah.
ago. Yeah. So, Chris, what do you think? I kind of put my thought out there, but what do you think, Chris?
I think, and I said this before, I think every theory that I've heard, especially the Saturn theory that I just heard from Gavin, it's a bunch of looking at something and then trying to see if there's a connection. And if you look hard enough, you're going to find a connection between everything. So I think what kind of sparked this was in the 70s, when there was all those people that, you know, that died at 27, all these big names. People were like, wow, there's something going on with this. And then, you know, it didn't take until there was not a lot in the 80s. There was one in the 90s. There was Kurt Cobain in the 90s, and then Amy Winehouse in 2011. I just think, like, if those people had died at 28, you would hear 28 Club, and then you would hear, 29 Club. I think you can find a club with every single age. It's a bunch
there
of
is. Yeah, for sure. There's another theory that I was looking at, fan club theory, basically saying 27 Club is not special. What about the 26 Club? It would have included rapper Mac Miller, folk legend Nick Drake, early RHCP guitarist Hillel Slakov, Jazz Cat, Fats Navano, or we pick twin digits. Here's the members of the Forever 44 Club: would be Billie Holiday, Marvin Gaye, Mary Queen of Scots, Steve Irwin, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Jackson Pollock. So basically, this theory is basically saying 27 Club is ridiculous, and the list just goes on that there's an endless number of people who've died at certain ages, and it's certainly odd, but the biggest thing is that there were the 4 famous rock musicians that died at the same age within a few years. And I think that's what kind of created the mythology. And that's the reason why there's a 27 Club, was because of Morrison, Hendrix, Joplin, all those people.
Yeah, but I think any club surrounding the death and the age of the death, like, it's kind of like, I don't know.
I mean, it was similar circumstances, they all died in similar ways, a lot of inner demons.
Yeah.
It was all the whole thing of people gaining fame young and not being able to handle it and going crazy. So, like, I mean, I think, like I just said, the reason why 27 Club exists is because of those 4 musicians. Because, I mean, if one of them was 26, one of them was 28, probably wouldn't have happened. Or it might have been like a 20s club, and it would be like just general musicians who died in their 20s. Who knows how that would have been.
Also, you have to think of, like, the stigma behind mental health. Now, it hasn't had so much of a stigma behind it, you know, for getting more information and stuff. Back then, it was like, if you know, like, were anxious or stuff or depressed, like, there was something wrong with you, you'd be hospitalized. And I think people weren't really introduced to all this stuff and as knowledgeable about all this stuff as we are now.
Yeah, I agree. Wrapping it up, Chris, any final thoughts? No final thoughts.
Sorry, I was rubbing my eyes. I'm getting tired. No, I think I said I think I said what I said about my thoughts on the whole conspiracy thing, about how I think it's just a bunch of looking under a microscope.
And, like, drawing connections wherever you can.
Yeah, and just finding whatever connection you can find.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love our awkward endings into the endings. I need an excuse to bring the music back. So, very deep, dark episode, but a good one. I think it turned out pretty well. I also was the one who researched it. So, it's, again, like I said, if you are interested in this, there's still so much more we didn't touch upon. Not so much more. There's a little more. We touched upon a lot. So, yeah. That's it for this episode. See you guys next week.
Enjoyed.
Bye. We'll think of an ending next week. That's what we say every week.
No, we won't.
No, we're not. We're not going to do it.
Want more of This Strange World? You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at This Strange World Podcast, and on Twitter at This Strange Pod.
So now I'm gonna be doing the sources, yay! But I'm gonna do it like Gavin, because we love how Gavin does it. So now onto our sources, because we didn't know this stuff. Ooh, and we got it from somewhere. So Gavin, what are your sources?
Oh, I love getting close to the mic at the end. So, there were a lot of things at the end that I was just Googling, but these were the main sources that I had. Rolling Stones, the 27 Club of Brief History. That was on the Rolling Stone website. History.com, music legends who lived fast and died at 27. That's where I got a lot of the descriptions for people. HappyMag.tv, why are we obsessed with the 27 Club? That was a lot of the theories. The Conversation, the 27 Club is a myth. 56 is the bum note for musicians. That's where I got all the statistics. History.com, Curse of 27, or is it only rock and roll? That's where I got a lot of the research at the very end. And White Lighter Myth Wikipedia, I got from the Wikipedia for the White Lighter Myth. I saw it was on a bunch of other websites, but it was mostly well worded in the Wikipedia. So yeah, and I mean, there's still tons of other things. There were YouTube videos. I didn't really take anything from them, but there's a lot of good summary YouTube videos out there, and so many websites. If you look it up, it's all over the place, which is surprising because I feel like I hadn't heard of it really before this. So those are my sources, and this is the epilogue of the show. Chris, say what you always say. You know what you say. Let's say it on three. Let's say it together. You know what we say at the end of the show? 1, 2, 3. At the end of the rainbow, it's a rainbow.
What?
That's what we say.
What
do you think that we said?
I thought we said, don't do drugs and stay in school.
No, you gotta do don't do drugs, okay?
That's what I was gonna say. I was testing you.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Craig, take us out.
We're all tired and manic.
I need to have a word with Gavin at the end of this when the cameras are off.
The microphones are off?
The microphones are off. I'm tired.
Don't do drugs, stay in school, okay?
There it is. Have a good one.
Bye.